Hello, what's up everybody? It's Kalaveet, and we got games. It's Caloom versus Hclat, and to talk about the history of the players in the tournament so far. Caloom played versus Tricking week 1, won that 2-1. He choked game 1 pretty badly, but looked like he was the one that was the least satisfied with that. He seemed very dissatisfied with his play, and then he had 2 very good games after that. And Hclat won versus Jirachi week 1, so they are both in the winners bracket. Hclat also played very well in that Jirachi game. Jirachi obviously a very high profile player. We had a Zapdos versus Metagross start here. And interestingly enough, Hclat leading with the toxic Metagross, probably intended to catch a Swampert, and that's exactly what he gets. Sends in a Salamence into a Swampert, because Swampert very, very unlikely to go for a Hydro there. We also do not see leftovers here. So could this potentially be a CV Mens and a physical offense team from Hclat? The toxic Metagross would also suggest that to lure the Pert in, so that like a DD-Tar or an Arrow in the back would have an easier time later on in the match. And on the other end, we've got a Zapdos lead with BP from Kaloom. BP is obviously usable on other teams, but it does synergize well with some special offense stuff, like Duck Trio. We have also seen Kaloom use special offense in Game 1 versus Tricking last week, so he's no stranger to that. Looks like we've got some more bulk on Hclat's team, so we've got a revealed Blissey now. Could also see a Magneton in that case, right? If we got presumably CV Mens, and Magneton obviously synergizes well with Metagross, and to an extent Blissey too. Could be double blob then. And Jirachi is revealed from Kaloom, so makes you think that even more that it's special offense now. Now we have to see if the Jirachi is more of a defensive variant, so we could still be looking at a TSS team, but it could also be a Superachi, and then it would probably have to switch out of the Blissey here. But if it clicks up here or whatever, which it doesn't seem to have, otherwise it probably would have clicked it right there. Yeah, it could beat the Blissey. And we also see a Heracross from Kaloom, which is a pretty big threat to Hclat's team, especially since that Mens does not have leftovers and is therefore on a much shorter timer than most Menses. But getting Heracross in is pretty tough, and so is switching into Metagross, so we'll have to see if Kaloom maybe just stays in and clicks Mega Horn here to get damage on whatever's coming in. And how Hclat plays around this. No, Kaloom switches out into Cloyster, actually. So we've got some Spikes offense here, I guess. Not as special as I initially thought, maybe. And we're gonna have to see if Hclat is just gonna attack this Cloyster to get rid of it as fast as possible. Right, that's what he does. Cloyster gets 1 spike up and out of the way. Might need to spin later. Swampert taking even more damage here from a mash, and it doesn't recover any of that with the leftovers because it's toxic here. If it stays in, it even takes more. So yeah, we're gonna have to see if what Hclat has to sort of capitalize on that toxic Swampert. Does reveal a Suicune, so that makes Magneton even more likely. And now Kaloom just decides to Mega Horn into the Mens, which is a pretty obvious switch from Hclat. And Hclat is in a position, if this is CB-Mans, to just click the right button here. Does not really seem to get it. It's a pretty tough call between, you know, going for slide, EQ, I guess, and HP flying is sort of a mid-ground. So he always makes a little bit of progress with that, but obviously you would rather click the bigger button and just get it right. But HP flying works, I suppose. Now, at this point, I think Hclat is pretty much in the lead. Kaloom has got some pretty weakened mons already, and the toxic meta plan in the beginning worked out as well. But Kaloom also has a spike down, and as I said, the Heracross is looking like a gigantic threat, with this Mens already being pretty low. So we'll have to see if he can bring this back with all of those factors. It's a Wish Rachi, so it is either gonna be Wish Call Mind or more defensive. Wishes up the Cloister, so that probably has to boom here on the Suicune, I assume. No, he just goes for more spikes. Pretty ballsy. But it was also kind of a toss-up because Hclat could also expect the boom and go into something like the Metagross to absorb it. Yeah. And Kaloom plays it risky, gets up all the spikes, but now the Suicune has a ton of boosts. And this Zapdos is not gonna KO it from 54 with all of those boosts. Oh, Kaloom actually thinks it's gonna switch out, but no, Hclat just decides to stay in. I guess maybe Kaloom said, I'm going off a throw here. But I think Surf was quite reasonable to just make progress there. If Hclat switches, obviously Suicune also takes spikes next time it comes in. Kaloom also does not have Roar to just send it out. So the Suicune is gonna get the kill on the Zapdos as well. That's why I was thinking maybe he should have just moved earlier, but obviously Hclat could have just expected that, so you have to respect the spike in some sort of way, I suppose. But now Hclat is way further ahead. Just has to play fast enough to not let Kaloom whittle him down with the spikes on Hclat's side, right? Swampet's also on a timer for now. Can get wished up by the Jirachi, so we'll have to see about that. And also, since there seems to be a physical Mens with leftovers, actually we don't quite know that. I'm thinking it's probably gonna be DD. So if Kaloom wins with anything, it's probably going to be the Mens, I assume. But Hclat should have an answer for that in the back. Let's see. The Metagross can probably still tank an EQ. The Salamence can also intimidate. Kaloom's Salamence also once, so there's also that factor. And Hclat actually goes into Salamence right here. Is this again just gonna be a safe HP flying, or is he gonna go for the Rock Slide? He just goes for the HP flying as the mid ground to hit everything. And this Swampert is so low, it's probably not gonna do much at all anymore. And the Rachi is now trapped together with the Magneton, which is slower though, but can it get a T-Wave off? Yeah, exactly. Since this is pretty defensive Jirachi, the Magneton easily lifts those, lifts that Fire Punch. Even after 3 spikes. So Jirachi is not gonna be a match winner here really either. Seems like it's all down to the men's. Let's see how Kaloom uses it. Again, it's very unlikely to sweep between Metagross and an Intim user. And Metagross is probably just gonna get a kill here. I would say probably you just let the Jirachi die. And then you have to see if you go for it with men's. Swampert probably doesn't live EQ. Especially if the Metagross has Protect too. It might not. Could just be Boom last. Also, I guess this Jirachi isn't that defensive. I just calced and it did 70, so it's probably like... it could still be defensive. Well, Wish CM calcs and the defensive calcs are pretty similar. Kaloom not able to hit the right button there with the mans. And I guess Hclat doesn't choke there, so that's what Kaloom was going for. Just booms, because boom is last, not protect. And game 1 goes to Hclat. Very convincingly. Again, I think this mostly came down to how Kaloom played around the Suicune. Played a very risky game there. But yeah, I respect at least the second spike somewhat. As for the predictions, since we're in between games now, most of you predicted Hclat to win. It's 40-14 in my notes in favor of Hclat. Let's see if that's still the same. Let me check. Where is it? It's 41-14, so even more in Hclat's favor, so yeah. Hclat obviously also the winner of the last CI, so a lot of people think he's going to win the tour as a whole. He also looked, as I said, very good versus Jirachi in week 1. And is looking to now beat Kaloom potentially 2-0 and go further in the winner's bracket. Next game started, let's see. We got T-Tar versus T-Tar Elite. It's always a bit interesting. If any of the T-Tars have Brick Break, they are quite likely to stay in. If one of them is a cheesy little Brick Break CB lead, it might just get a kill on the other. But they both switch out to the most common switch, which is Skarmory. And they are both just gonna get spikes up, because none of them have Taunt, apparently. Yep. Are they just both gonna go for 3 spikes? Yep. And Hclat's one seems to be consistently faster than Kaloom's, so he just gets the raw off. Will we see a Toxic here? No, he just protects to see what Mens does, to see if it's potentially Fire Blast. So far, it's been no brain turns for them, except for maybe the Protect turn from Hclat, but I think that's a fair play. Toxic wouldn't have done much either, and clicking Drill Peck's not good as well, so that's only fair. Now we're gonna have to see what Hclat switches into this Gengar, which reveals Will-O-Wisp. He could have something like a Blissey, obviously, in the back. Maybe a Celebi. Definitely should have something to absorb status. Maybe it's also going to be a Pursuit Tyranitar. Kaloom has to be thinking about that. Especially since it switched out of the opposing Tyranitar. And Hclat just goes for a Roar to get some damage on something else. And to potentially scout Kaloom's team more. Doesn't seem to have the best Willow switch in. And the Tyranitar does have lefties, but it's actually slower than the Blissey. And it gets smacked by a Seismic Toss on A good prediction by Kaloom on Hclat's focus punch. Is he gonna go for it again? Yes, again. Does not want anything else on his team to take that focus punch. Gengar not a good switch. Perhaps Skarmory is fine, but Swampert is the pretty obvious last. And he actually gets the turn right too on Rock Slide. Nice. But his Swampert does take some spike damage in the progress of all of that. And yeah, that's precisely why switching Pert with 3 spikes down into Tar is pretty scary. If there's an arrow in the back, you want your Pert to be as healthy as possible. But with the Skarmory burned and the Swampert having Protect, it was pretty easy for Kaloom to just stay in there and nurse it up a little more. Kaloom just goes for a Toxic since he thinks his Skarmory is consistently slower than Hclat's, and he might as well just predict a switch out if that happens. And now Hclat just lets his burn Skarmory go. And this Tita is looking like a Pursuit variant here with Leftovers and Fire Blast. At least that would make sense. I'd like that on this team too. Pretty standard looking big 5 from Kaloom here, with Mens as the last, which a lot of people think is also the best on this kind of team. Oh, and it's Refresh Pert from Hclat, so that blanks the Toxic from Skarmory pretty well. But it does get roared out, can't do too much back to it. If Skarmory gets any lower, Arrow is gonna be even more of a threat for Kaloom here. He has to play very conservatively around his Pert health and his Skarm health. And that does not make things better, because potentially Blissey could have taken a hit from Arrow, and it's also going to be important for Zapdos, but it getting Will-O-Wisp and Taunted is, look, that's very, very bad for Kaloom here. Hclat has a ton of threats now, especially with those 3 spikes down, that he can use to great success against Kaloom's team. And Kaloom just decides to sack Skarmory now. Makes sense. The 3 spikes are already down. They are not getting spun away by Hclat. But it is obviously a little rough into the arrow. And he uses that sack to get some more health on Blissey. Is this gonna be Protox? Zapdos? Yeah, exactly. And Kaloom reveals Wish. So he's gonna be able to sort of comfortably stay in on the Zapdos right now, which was definitely not what you wanted to see there if you're Hclat, I'd say, because that makes getting the Protox turns on this Blissey ride a lot tougher. But yeah, Blissey is still pressured here no matter what. And that's a great Toxic from Kaloom here, hitting the Pert. It's probably gonna make his Men's life a bit easier if it's a physical one. It might just be special though. But yeah, what it mostly does is just give Kaloom a switch here into Gengar, as Swampert has to refresh, and Kaloom reveals Giga Drain. This could technically still be... Actually, I don't think it's going to be Pursuita because of the damage it did to Pert. It did a little bit too much with that Rock Slide. So Kaloom doesn't have to be too scared of Pursuit here, I think. And Giga Drain seems to be some safe damage, but if he wants to do more and not fall behind too much, then he has to think about clicking something like perhaps T-Bolt for Hclat's Gengar or Ice Punch for the Zapdos. Perhaps Hclat also just feels like Swampert isn't that important anymore, although it can still buffer a hit from a lot of things. So there's definitely still some value to it. It just depends on whether he thinks his other mons are more worth it. I'm just looking at the Tyranitar and it's pretty low here, so it might be time to sack that one. It's also slower than the Blissey, so it's not gonna get a hit on that either. Hclat's really thinking about this one. And Kaloom goes for a Willow, misses. takes a chunk on his Gar for that. Willow on, mostly a predicted switch out there. Arrow could have taken anything but a Willow from Gengar, so that play is pretty respectable too. And he can heal himself up with Giga Drain here, but he also just gave Hclat 2 more turns of leftovers. Obviously, granted that the Willow miss was pretty lucky, but you know, Willow gives, Willow takes. And Hclat correctly predicts the Giga Drain on this turn, putting him further ahead. Now Kaloom has to see if he's gonna just switch the pretty obvious Bliss in here, or just decide to trade damage with the Zapdos here. The Gengar is faster, notably. And Kaloom just decides to go into Blissey here. Gets the turn right too. Hclat does not go for Toxic. But with the 3 spikes down, there isn't too much value lost for Hclat there. And Hclat's probably going for Willow here, right? Misses too, though. And Kaloom is probably gonna go for Crunch or Pursuit here. That's right. Now, Giga Drain might be a roll on this tar, but Kaloom has no business switching out here, really, I think, because of the triple spikes. He's not going to be able to use the lefties to get that tar up further out of Giga Drain range. So he has to see what his odds on the range are. But he could have used the Tyranitar as a sack, I guess. Crunch would probably be the best move if you just stay in here. And Hclat just gets that, which is, again, probably a range. So, and the Tita does not successfully trap the Gengar, putting Hclat even further ahead. The Gengar being alive is very useful because it lets him pressure the Blissey for his Zapdos. And Kaloom is thinking about those calcs. But Hclat is a pretty cheeky chatter, so you never know if he's too serious about that now. If Kaloom is not able to bring this game back, he's gonna lose the series. And Hclat is gonna continue to go on in the winners brackets. Is there any way for him to win? Well, if he correctly predicts around the Aerodactyl with his Pert, maybe there is. But it seems like Hclat is just gonna grind him out with the spikes and his advantage. Actually, makes the switch that I have to think about here a little bit. Why would he switch his Zapdos in it? He thinks the Tita sack is more worth it than health on the Zapdos here. He does get Fire Punch crit, to be fair. The Tita still being alive does give Hclat a sack later on to put some offensive pressure on Kaloom as well. And I guess Giga Drain does sort of suggest Fire Punch as well, because Grass Fire coverage is just that damn good. So maybe that's why Hclat made that switch. Figured it wouldn't be T-Bolt or Ice Punch that turn. And maybe you also figured Kaloom would just say, okay, I'm just gonna take the 3 little bit of health from the Giga Drain, but that's not what he decided to do. It also means he revealed Fire Punch, so there's a little bit of a risk involved there. Though I guess you wouldn't really want to click Fire Punch into anything but the Zapdos. Maybe the Gar. Depends on your last move. I'm assuming it's Taunt or Boom. So maybe you would just have to reveal Fire Punch later. So we're gonna have to see if that reveal matters anyhow. Probably doesn't too much. Kaloom is really digging into his timer here. If I recall correctly, he didn't use his timer too properly last week. But I might be off there. So far, this CI has been very, very upset heavy. Hclat being one of the people, I guess, who probably wasn't in a position to get upset really too much because he was fighting Jirachi, who made a very deep run last CI anyway, so that's not too much of an upset. But yeah, Kaloom beating Hclat would be one, I suppose, based on the predictions, at least. But Hclat is looking very comfortable here with a 1-0 lead and a good shot to win this game as well. So we are gonna have to see if Hclat is immune to this upset curse that many other players have had in CI7 so far. Kaloom's also brought a lot of this sort of bulky-ish TSS stuff with Skarmory. He has brought that twice last week and again this week as well. While Hclat has been a little bit more unpredictable, he's brought Spike Stacks twice last week and the 40 TSS. So this team is relatively different from that. And wow, that's a critical hit with a para here. So Hclat is not going to say, okay, I'm going for the full para here and maybe just pick off this Blissey here. He just decides to get in the Gengar, taunts the Blissey now, but he can't Will-O-Wisp it now. So unless Kaloom gets fully para'd, yeah, this para wasn't actually too beneficial for Hclat. This Gengar might be able to, probably will to be honest, take another T-Bolt from Hclat. Another Will-O-Mist though. There have been so many this match. This is why I'm a big fan of just 3 attacks and Explosion or Debond or whatever Gengar. Because it can't miss Willow. But it's such a good progress making move. So sometimes you can't really forget about it like I like to do. And again, Hclat sending in his Zapdos into the Gengar here. And Kaloom just decides to go for a Fire Punch, get more Zapdos on, get more damage on the Zapdos, and lets his Gengar go. So now that Arrow is pretty free to lock itself into Double Edge, actually. Again, Hclat has also got to think about this man's last, about what set it would be, and if he can potentially lose to it. Since this Pert is Surf, Refresh, Protect, it might not have Ice Beam, but he does have a free sack. So he's not going to let this Mance just get a DD off if it's DD Mance. And his Gengar is not Ice Punch, so it would have to hit Willow. Maybe he would go for Toxic too, or just send an Arrow to Slide. Now we do just see Hclat's Zapdos fainting to Kaloom's Swampert. But the Swampert does have to take a Willow in the meantime. And actually takes a Giga Drain too. So it doesn't even make that much progress on the Gengar. Torrent Surf helps. But yeah. It's gonna get a little bit more healthy on this Giga Drain too. And here comes the Salamence, so let's see if Hclat decides to go for Willow or just sacks his Tyranitar. Taunt is even safer, I guess. I forgot about that. So that way Kaloom can never go for Dragon Dance. Will Hclat just go for Willow then here? Or sack the Tar? I'd probably go for Willow, I think. Let's see. If he just goes Arrow here, that works as well, but it is a little bit risky if Kaloom decides to click Rock Slide, I suppose. Hclat just does the no-brainer move of clicking Rock Slide here. Now he sacks the Tita. And Gengar should be able to just taunt this Blissey, so it dies for sure. And since Kaloom does not have anything to hit this Gengar with, since it's just Seismic Toss Toxic, it dies pretty easily to the Gengar. And the Gengar can just taunt the Mansear. Is Arrow gonna hit the Rock Slide to finish off the game, now that it's not intimidated? Yep, it hits the Rock Slide, and that's GG's. Hclat takes it 2-0 over Kaloom. So he's not affected by the CI7 upset curse just yet. And Hclat actually reveals that the Gara did have special attack. As I told you all, he's a bit of a cheeky chatter, so you have to take anything he says with a grain of salt, with a little bit of scrutiny. And Kaloom, who looked very strong in week 1, not as strong in this one, although this game was a lot closer than it looked, I would say. But I think Hclat made so much progress in the mid game that he was able to find a very, very safe plan around this DD-Mens and just decided to execute it like that. So perhaps it also just simply looks a bit closer than it was. And the Pert could have also lived a hit from the Mens too if the Aerodactyl would get intimidated and set up on and missed out on the Rock Slide kill. So there's also that to consider. So Hclat looked very, very good in the set. Kaloom did quite well too, but he was not able to take it over Hclat. They brought somewhat similar squads here, I guess, but not too much. Hclat is a lot more offensive, sorry. Thanks, mouse. And this is quite the different squad for Kaloom, so perhaps he tried to bring that in order to spice up the builder and make himself a little bit less predictable, but it did not work out for him this time. Okay, I hope you all enjoyed. Don't forget to donate as well to keep the tour as nice as it has been so far. And hope you all have a nice day and see ya. Goodbye.